Welcome again, everyone, to Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. I'm Cody, and I'm going to be your de facto hostess. We had a little debate over who's going to lead this one, but we are taking a look tonight at a very notorious case in the United States by the name of D.B. Cooper's hijacking. And this is the famous guy who jumped out of a plane and stole a bunch of money, supposedly, and we'll get into all the details of this in a bit. Pretty famous case as well, I will say. So odds are you've probably heard of this one before, I would think, D.B. Cooper. And we'll go through all the details of this and talk about some theories today, and also talk about, you know, what we think might have happened and who we think it may have been, if we even can come up with a solid suspect profile for that. But I think we have some people to take a look at here. So get started today, I guess, since it's been a bit, we will kind of highlight what we've been up to here, and I'll tell you what I've been doing recently, and then let the other hosts introduce themselves and tell you what they've been up to as well. So my summer's quickly coming to an end as I record this. I have to go back to school and teach again here starting on Monday, which is just yuck. So that's coming back up. And leisure-wise, I just came back from Michigan and actually saw Brett, one of the hosts, while I was there. So that was fun. Go back to my hometown, and we'd swam in the lake quite a bit. And what else did we do? Played some games and saw some family and friends. And as far as around here, not much. I'm frantically trying to finish like 3 projects before my summer's over. And I don't know, I might be succeeding, I might not be. I'm very close to finishing, I think, the video game Empire of Sin that I've been playing in the background. So that's kind of what I'm trying to at least get through that one before the summer's over. So that's what I've been up to.
Hello, everyone. I am Brett. Let's see. So season 3 of Bluey dropped today, and so that's been being binged in my house right now. But I can't really complain about it. I honestly probably would say, I mean, I certainly don't have a ranking of these, but I would put it in my own personal ranking quite high in children's shows that I've seen. So I don't mind watching it. In fact, I enjoy watching quite a bit. But as far as my own personal things to do, I've been continuing to kind of play through Elden Ring a bit here and there. Been playing some Minecraft here and there. I also have I downloaded a game today that I'm really excited to play, but I didn't take the time, or didn't have a time to do it yet today. But it's called Rumbleverse. I don't know if that's either for you gentlemen have that's come up on your radar. It's essentially a wrestling themed battle royale. So like we'll just throw Fortnite out there as like the stereotypical battle royale that everyone knows, where you're like trying to be the last person standing, eliminate everyone else in the lobby. This one has no guns. It's all just wrestling moves, basically. So it's all like grapples and suplexes and kicks and chops, and it's pretty amazing to watch. But yeah, I'm looking forward to giving that a go or two.
I'm not sure how I haven't heard of this.
Same.
It's free to play.
Is it on PC or phone or console or
PC and consoles? Yes.
Really?
Might have to check that out.
I don't know if it's on Switch or not. You'd have to check that out. But
Okay, that sounds pretty. I had to ask also. I really don't know what Bluey is, but when you say it's one of the better ones, do you mean compared to what's out now, or like compared to when you were actually a kid?
Oh, all time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
What is it? What is the concept? Give me like a 1-line IMDb. I don't know what it is.
Australian dog family doing family things.
So Rocco's Modern Life.
Perhaps not quite that.
What he's really saying, Justin, is it's not that good, and his family might listen to this episode. Brett, just blink twice. We'll know. Okay? All right. And Justin, what have you been up to?
Last week, my wife and I celebrated our 4th anniversary.
Yay! Congrats.
Thank you. Went down to the Bristol Renaissance Festival in Bristol, Wisconsin. Absolutely gigantic. And we spent the entire day there, probably only saw at most a third of the stuff there was to see. I had a blast. I could have done without the 95-degree weather, but other than that, it was a heck of a good time. I highly recommend it to anyone who's interested at all in medieval stuff, either historical or fantastical, they had kind of a nice mix of all that. Great time. And if you do go, I would recommend bring some cash along, because if you're looking to eat there, for some reason the food vendors only take cash. Most of the other places will take cards and things, but if you're looking to get food or drinks, only cash for some reason.
Do you have to do a currency exchange, or do they just take American money?
No, they take American money, which
it'll ruin it.
I know, right?
Yeah, but, low immersion.
Well, I mean. If you want to, trade wood for sheep, as it were, then I'm sure you could probably work something out. But it was a blast. Other than that, just been dealing with work stuff. I'm not going to dwell on that too much. It's not great, but it's a living. So I've actually been kind of looking forward to this as a break from that. And it should be fun tonight, I think.
Now, I got to ask, because my memory could be wrong on this from when I was a kid, but you said it was called the Bristol Renaissance Fair.
Yes.
Is that the name of where it's at, or is that the company name of the Renaissance Fair?
Nope. It is. That is the town, the area that it's in, Bristol, Wisconsin.
It is, huh? See, it's weird because you always talk about. Is that where you guys have always gone?
No, this is the first time for me. The only other Renaissance fair I've been to before this was the little tiny ones they used to have in Ishpeming before they stopped doing those.
Okay. Yeah,
so
I asked because I went to one once or twice as a kid, somewhere near the Flint area, and I thought those were called the Bristol Renaissance Fair, but I don't know if there's that couldn't be a coincidence. I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, maybe
I might have the name wrong.
Maybe, but yeah, this is south of Green Bay, so yeah, it's a completely different area.
Okay,
but we went to one. I guess, well, it would have been probably before we had our kids, so like 6+ years ago. But there's one by, I think it's by Holly, Michigan.
Okay,
I believe that's where it was, and it was really good. We enjoyed that quite a bit. That was fun.
Is that towards the Flint area that way?
Yes.
Okay, maybe that's the
like
one.
South of that a little bit, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I just remember I went like once or twice as a kid. I just remember throwing tomatoes at someone's head and throwing knives, which I thought was super cool at like a young age. I was like, yeah.
Both things you could also do at the Bristol Fair.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
Both things you could do on a Saturday night too. We'll see. Upcoming Man Weekend. Joe, if you're listening to this.
And you better be.
Planned. Yeah, and you better be. All right. Sweet. All right. Well, let's get into tonight's case file, I guess, then. This is kind of more, I guess, the closest one we've done to this is probably the Lisa Lam mystery in terms of like a true story crime type thing.
Yeah.
I forgot we had done that one, but so this is DB Cooper, and I guess we'll start with just kind of how we had heard about this. I couldn't tell you how I originally first heard about this. I don't remember that. I just remember like the legend of the case always really captured my attention. And I know this is one we've looked at a couple times in some after school clubs that I've ran where we look at mysteries and cases as well. But essentially just like the idea of everything this case stands for, like somebody who is stealing money and jumping off a plane and like in some way sticking it to like the government and like the details of what happened after he jumped and, you know, where he went and who he was. And I just remember all these things like really pulling me in, but it probably, if I had to guess, I probably wouldn't say I knew about this until after high school. I wouldn't think, like, it doesn't sound familiar to me, at least at a quick memory here. So probably how I first knew about this, I would say.
Yeah. Funny you mentioned that. I think probably the first thing I remember hearing this was in the Kid Rock song where it's in that one lyric in Ba What Ba, I believe it is, but yeah, I also couldn't say when exactly, unless that was it when I heard about it the first time. And I don't know that I don't think I ever like went out searching for information on it, but I did like get pieces of it eventually, and like I had an understanding of what it was about. And it's just really a kind of a cool. Well, part of what makes it cool is that's like it's unsolved. It's like there's all this mystery around it that you don't know. like what happened to the guy, and there's just a lot of mystery about the circumstances and how it happened in the first place. So it certainly is a pretty cool thing to just kind of browse over.
I forgot it was in the Kid Rock song, but yeah, that probably came out in like 99, 2000.
Yeah,
Sounds about right.
So maybe I had heard about this a little before that, because I think I knew what it was by that point. Interesting.
Okay. And I actually can narrow down exactly when I first heard about this case.
He was on a plane.
It was about 10 years ago, give or take, when I was first starting to get back into comic books. And I wasn't quite sure what to start reading again. DC had its New 52 reboot of its entire line, so there was that, but I was curious as to what else was out there. So I was looking at a bunch of other like comic book review sites to see what was hot and what was new and whatnot, called The Secret History of D.B. Cooper. And it got 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10, very solid, scores across the board. And I had never heard of the guy before. So I started reading into it, and it's like, okay, it's a fictionalized, highly fictionalized account of this plane jacker from 1971, and what happened to him after he disappeared. The comic book has him going to work for the CIA as like some sort of remote viewing / psychic agent fighting the USSR. It's really kind of weird and strange, but it's a surprisingly good read. I actually have the collected edition of it right here. But that was the first time I'd ever heard about him. And after that, once I read this, I'm like, okay, what was this guy really about? So I started looking a bit more into it, and that was my first real introduction to the case.
I feel like this dude's just flexing on his Brett. I don't know. He's got the book. He's got the other book. He's drinking the drink. Tell him about the drink you're drinking, Justin.
Oh, sure. So before DB Cooper pulled off his heist, he ordered, like you do on an airplane, he ordered a drink, and the drink he ordered was a bourbon and 7-Up, which I am drinking right now. I'm not the biggest whiskey or bourbon fan, but I wanted to be thematic. So
that's fair. Did you have the 7-Up on hand, or did you go out to get that for this?
Nope. I had it on hand.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
So you didn't really try, is what you're telling us. All right.
Well, I went out and got the bourbon.
Oh, okay. That's even bigger then. Okay,
that's the more important thing.
Yeah, I guess so then. I assumed you had that one, but not the other. Okay.
Nope.
Interesting. All right, cool. Well, let's get into this then. So I guess to start, let's maybe just talk about an outline of the basic case details for anyone who doesn't know the story. And then we could kind of team hodgepodge this story together, I guess, if you want to jump in at any point here. And then we can get into like some of the stuff that happened since 1971 and talk about some of that. So I guess to put ourselves in the mindset for this, right, we have to kind of go back to the year 1971, which for those audience listeners out there is quite a bit different than 2022 in terms of a lot of things, airport security and, the way people traveled and crime investigations and all sorts of things at the time. And this is taking place here. I have at least down as the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, 1971. Mm-hmm. There is a person who buys a ticket and this was a debate in the Netflix documentary I should mention as well. We all saw at least part of the recent Netflix documentary, so we'll reference that a few times here in tonight's episode as well, which is called, I don't even know.
DB Cooper, where are you? Complete with the exclamation point and question mark at the end, like a freaking Scooby-Doo episode.
Ah, yes. The 4th episode was like titled like that exact thing, I think so. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, this guy signs in his flight log or ticket purchase, I guess, if you will, as Dan Cooper, but that supposedly got misheard by some reporter later and was changed to DB, but the documentary at least said they liked it better, so they kept it. We should clarify, this is the plane hijacking guy, Dan Cooper, in 1971, not to be confused with the porta potty robberies of 71. That was I'm a Pooper, so that's a different person, different case, just to be clear. This is Dan Cooper, DB Cooper, 1971. All right, so flight 305 was headed from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington, and there is a gentleman on the flight who eyewitnesses at the time at least declared to be about his mid-40s and is just kind of dressed as a typical businessman of the day with a kind of business black suit, black tie, white shirt, kind of chilling, and as Justin mentioned here, drinking his drink as the flight's going along, and kind of calls the stewardess over and hands her a note and basically claims to, and then shows her the actual bomb in his briefcase, which
Correct.
was, I guess we don't know if that was an actual bomb or not, right? Or if it was just like a prop bomb.
Yeah, she described it as a bundle of red sticks that kind of looked like dynamite, a lot of wires, and some sort of, she said it was like a clip or a clasp or something at one point, but something that looked convincing enough at least.
It had wired, it must have been real. So anyway, he asks for his demands to be met, essentially, to not blow up this plane and kill some people. And he is, what I have written down at least, is that he asked for 4 parachutes and $200,000 in small bills, or so, a very long debate about this in the Netflix show about what the wording is on these bills. We can get to that later, but
Yep.
and he says he will let the passengers out, which he then does in exchange for the parachutes and the money. And I didn't like explicitly hear it in the documentary here, but did he just essentially keep the crew that was already on the plane? Is that what happened?
Yeah, minus 2 of the stewardesses. He let 2 of them go, kept 1 of the stewardesses and both of the pilots, I believe. Hang on. I think there were 4 stewardesses actually. So he let 2 go, kept 2, and 2 pilots. I think that's how it went.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
So goes to show, if any of our listeners are stewardesses, you should be the worst stewardess because you'll be let go. The best ones will be kept on the plane. So he gets what he wants, and then the plane takes off again now from Seattle, where it's landed, and headed back south towards Reno, Nevada. And he asks for the plane to be flown at an unusually low altitude, with the flaps down to slow it down even more. And he jumps into what is referred to as the Dark Divide, which is not a term I had even heard of before, but apparently is a geographic region up in that area. And that's kind of like basically the end of
The facts.
the facts, if you want. Yeah, the facts, I guess, if you want to say that. So any details I missed on that?
He took off his tie before he jumped and like just tossed it into the plane for some reason. It's never been fully understood.
Yeah. Took the bomb with him. They had never found any trace of the bomb left on the airplane.
He took the bomb with him?
Yep.
Right.
And it wasn't just the flaps he had down. He also had the Boeing 727s have stairs in the back called F stairs. So they can actually fly with those lowered. And so he requested to have those lowered while they were cruising at 10,000 feet as well.
Okay.
So being that they were at 10,000 feet, they didn't have to pressurize the cabin. It was low enough that they could have normal pressure without needing to worry about too many issues from that. So that's part.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it also kind of leads into the ambiguity of when exactly he jumped out, because the stairs were down for a good portion of that time.
Okay, that makes sense as to why he made those requests then. It helps explain it. Just a couple other things I had written down here, just to know that it was night at this point, so it was dark out, and it was also raining. There's somewhat of a storm going on. So
yeah.
and also one thing I read in some quick prep work before this, and something I don't think they mentioned in the Netflix documentary, is that 3 planes actually shadowed the jet on the second flight. 2 jet fighters, Air Force planes, and 1 like kind of commercial plane that they got from somewhere. But basically the 3 planes like were following the Boeing on this flight, and they actually had to, because those planes couldn't fly as slow as the Boeing was. They actually had to like keep zigzagging behind it to keep from passing it. But just an interesting bit there that they were following it. But I mean, it's night, like somebody jumps out of a plane, like they're not going to like say, oh, there he goes. But they were like, they had eyes watching, I suppose, to
as much as they could.
Yeah. Okay, so that all sets our stage of this kind of infamous jump. And I just put a note here too. They'd mentioned like roughly the 200,000 would be about $1 million today, which Doesn't speak well for inflation either, I might add, but that's not that long ago, 50 years ago.
Yeah. But you could buy a car for like $500.
Yeah. All right. So this all occurs, and then the case, I mean, we want to stick with the timeline of the facts of the case, I guess. Essentially nothing happens for 9 years, as far as I know. And then 1980, a boy finds a package of rotting $20 bills, about $5,800, and the serial numbers matched the ones that they were giving to DB Cooper as part of his ransom money. I don't know what you call this, I guess, demands.
Yeah, so fair thing to put in there. Another bit that I read was the FBI had in when they were taking the time to get all this money prepared for the demand, they actually like photocopied like every single bill, which seems excessive, but that's what I read, is that they made copies basically of the bills so that they could identify them later.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, so like I guess the FBI agent that they went to, the family went to after the kid found the money, he had to like go through pages and pages and pages of bills trying to match up the serial number and the year to what was put in front of him. So
was there any mention of with that? Because the Netflix documentary kind of played up quite a bit this finding of the money, and I had heard that tidbit before, but I hadn't heard any of the background on the case before with the finding of the money. But were the bills, I mean, did either of your research say like the bills that they found were sequential as far as the order like they would have given them to him in?
Seeing if I have anything written down about that. I know it was mentioned one way or the other in the book I read, but
just wondering if this is like, a cross reference of bills that they had given him, so like somebody had clearly jostled these and moved them around, or if this was just
I don't have anything written down that they were sequential, but with regards to them being moved around, they were in place long enough that the ink, from one was kind of transferred to the other in terms of serial numbers and other markings. So they were pretty much in place for a while they were rotting or, just out there abandoned.
Okay.
So yeah, probably still in the same brick that they had been in when they were handed out.
I found this, it's on Wikipedia, but it has a footnote referencing the FBI Freedom of Information Act documents. But the bills were all arranged in the same order as when given to Cooper.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and some researchers even did tests like throwing, wads of money into a river and trying to let them drift to see how they'd act and whatnot, and they tended to separate in the water as they drifted down rather than kind of staying together like that. So, which kind of led them to the conclusion that however the bills ended up there, they were placed there. They didn't just, fall into the water and, get washed down there at some point, because they would have been jostled more than they were.
Anyone seen, I'm just thinking, I'm going over this placement of the dollar bills down to the minutia here, but a lot of this case's details are just that. Does anybody know, including the people who were on the plane, like how he was transporting this money? Like, was it given to him in a singular package? Was it in multiple packages? Did he put it inside a bag?
It was, I believe it was delivered in a satchel, not the kind of satchel he asked for. He had specific requests that he had made so that he could attach it to the parachutes better, but they gave him just kind of like a standard little bag without any clasps to easily attach it. So he had to jury rig basically a harness for the bag to keep it on him so it wouldn't blow away when he jumped out.
Okay.
So he cannibalized one of the parachutes to do that. He, opened it up, cut the strings, and then kind of fashioned a harness out of it from the book I read anyway.
Should have brought a fanny pack. thought they said this guy was clever.
Yeah. Did he also request that like the stewardesses go to the cabin or something? I don't know if that's what he requested, but I'm just thinking, like, didn't he say something like he was in the cabin by himself when he went out there? Because they didn't know when he jumped, technically, right?
Yeah. So he wanted, he didn't want anyone to cross the curtain between the cabin and where he was sitting, pretty much is what it boiled down to once, all the passengers were off. So he could kind of keep an eye on people and all that. Eventually, the stewardess that he had been keeping the closest tabs on, she convinced him to let her go see the pilots and talk to them about something. But he said, once you're there, don't come back across the curtain. So after that point, it's kind of anyone's guess when he actually jumped, but he tried to keep everyone kind of compartmentalized as best he could.
Okay, so, well, I mean, is there anything else you guys want to consider as facts for the case? Maybe let's go there.
I've got a little bit on the types of parachutes. I'm not sure if that's okay. So the 4 parachutes he ordered were 2 front parachutes and 2 back parachutes. The front parachutes being ones that I gather are like reserves. Like if the back one fails, then you pull the one on the front. It's speculated he ordered 2 sets to imply that he was going to take a hostage so that he would have more leeway in negotiations and that sort of thing. The back parachutes, from what I've read, they were 2 different types. One was like a military grade, so very straightforward, very not very fancy, just a kind of a your standard conical looking parachute that you can't really steer very well. And from what I understand, the other was, I think it was called a Pioneer model, where it was more like something you'd have for recreation, where it was shaped a bit differently, where you could kind of steer where you were going a bit more.
Okay.
And from what I've read, the one he used to actually jump out was the military grade one, which lends some or it opens up some questions about if he had military training or whatnot, and if he would have felt more comfortable with that sort of shoot versus the civilian, recreational grade one. So there's that.
Now, did they say, Brett, were you gonna say something?
The only thing I had here written down was, I think beyond the stack of bills that they found on the riverbed, I don't think any of the other bills have ever been found.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
So the rest of it, the 193,000
quite
remaining, that has never been found. Like, apparently hasn't been spent. So,
I mean,
yeah,
that is interesting. Like, why?
I mean, not that people have been like looking at every single bill in the United States since then, but
That's true. It's that Justin's work, and he doesn't check.
yeah. I mean, we have. I'm not going to go into specifics, obviously, but we do have security measures at my job that do also include serial numbers of certain bills. But I guarantee there's no place around in town where I work, at least, and I imagine it's probably the same on a wider scale, where they actually pay any attention to the serial numbers on bills at all. So it's there as a precaution, but how widely it's actually utilized is it's anyone's guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that would be. So how they were $20 bills, right? If they ended up being the payment. So how many $20 bills is that are still out there at large? It's quite a few. I mean, some could have a chance to get back to the. If I open a business, I'm going to have all my employees check for DB Cooper money first before we accept payment. So the other parachutes. So he jumped with one of the 4 or multiple of the 4?
Well, he had, I believe, one rear parachute and one of the front parachutes as backup.
Okay.
And I think the one he tore apart to make the harness for the money was one of the rear parachutes, I want to say. I think. I'm not 100% sure on that.
So he basically left one intact parachute on the plane.
Yes, I think.
If my math is correct here.
Mm-hmm.
Get into clue 1 + 2 + 1 + 1 + 2 + 1. Okay, and then I'm trying to see really for facts what else we have in here. We have some tests that were done on the tie later on. This was talked about in the documentary on Netflix as well. And I'll just give you the facts first, and then you can kind of we can talk about theories about that as well. But the fact had residues of certain kind of rarish metals at the time, which was titanium, pure titanium, I guess. And then what was the second one? I didn't catch it. Aluminum something. It wasn't just aluminum. It was like
I have
something.
I didn't watch that far in the Netflix show, but I do have a resource here. It's an alloy made of titanium and antimony. Does that sound right?
Maybe it was antimony. Maybe I heard aluminum. That could be.
Yeah, this is it's probably not. This probably wasn't what in the show, because apparently the story only dropped a few weeks ago.
Oh.
Hang on, I'll share this to the chat so you gents can take a look at that real quick. But yeah, I have my wife to thank for cluing me in on this story, actually. For those of you at home, I'll just summarize real quick. So clearly this is a case that's captured a lot of people's attention and imaginations for decades now. Research is still ongoing. And recently, a scientist did some examinations of particles found on the tie that Cooper discarded. And according to the story, at least, he found 3 particles of an alloy made of titanium and antimony, which is a very, very rare combination of metals. Apparently so rare, it was only made stateside, at least, in a company called Remcrew, based out of Midland, Pennsylvania. And he thinks that this breakthrough will help zero in on at least, where Cooper had worked, and possibly an identity of who he actually is after all this time. But like I said, this is a very recent story that just broke less than a month ago, according to my sources here, which is an MSN article for those listening at home. So yeah, it's I don't know how trustworthy it is, but it is something that popped up very recently. I figured it would be worth including.
Yeah, it's interesting also that it's like newer than the actual documentary we just watched as well. So now I'm like, spent all that time watching outdated stuff. Jeez.
Well, heck, if it makes you feel any better, I've read a almost 300-page book that was outdated by the time that documentary came out. So
that's fair.
Like the author, Jeffrey Gray, was in the documentary, and he's saying like, oh yeah, one of the prime suspects, oh yeah, he seemed plausible at first, but they ruled him out since, and most of his book is spent on trying to peg it on this guy, and like, well, I just wasted all that time. So
that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know, as far as facts, I just wrote down, they said the FBI closed the case, or seemingly closed the case. They were a little wishy-washy on that with some of the people interviewed in 2016, as a way to like just, I guess, get themselves off the hook for answering questions and crap. And then somebody already mentioned the FOIA that was placed against the government. So they had hundreds and up to thousands of pages of, was it FBI or CIA or both? I forget, documents released about DB Cooper and what the government knew about him. But so much of it was redacted
FBI,
that it was like...
Probably FBI.
Oh, wow.
The CIA doesn't generally operate on American soil.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. Good call.
Yeah.
So what they found in that, they kind of poked around with that a little bit as well. And then I don't really have a lot left here on facts of the case itself, other than if they pointed out, which I hadn't really done the math on, but they said if he was in his mid 40s, he'd be like 95 today if he was in his mid 40s, which is a whole nother subject of debate here. But so if he didn't pass away, he could be gone by now.
Yeah.
Unless he was, I mean, even if he was like 25 with heavy makeup or something, it's still a good chance he's gone. So
yeah. And on that note, there was, I mean, I know we're trying to focus on facts, but
yeah.
There is some speculation that he was wearing makeup. Like the stewardess said his hair was, black and very shiny, almost like it had been dyed. There's speculation that his skin tone was attempted to be altered to try and appear like darker than it actually was, because he was described as having kind of like an olive-y kind of skin tone. And
Okay.
so there's things like that crop up too, where it's like how much of what was even witnessed about this guy is credible.
Yeah. Brett, you got anything else for facts? Uh-oh, what's this he's found over here?
It's just a funny that I just was searching on Wikipedia. They had a GIF image like showing how he would have jumped out of the plane. It just made me laugh because it's like this picture of this giant airplane, and this little tiny stick figure like hops out the back.
That's amazing. Oh, so that's how gravity works. Okay.
The finest scientific research right there.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. Okay, so then I guess at that point, let's move into kind of theories or like unusual things about the case or beliefs that other people have about it. I know I mentioned here, Brett and I both watched the 4-episode Netflix documentary. Justin made it about halfway through, and then he's got some other readings as well there he brought in, and then maybe prior things we've heard about this case also, or outside information. So, I mean, it's kind of open. Where do you guys want to go with this? We can't cover in an hour and a half what everybody else covers for 50 years in some of these cases, but
yeah, especially when the suspect list is, over 1,000 people long. It's it seems like the FBI has tried to cover like every possible lead they could, and yeah, here we are 50 years later, and we still don't know who he was, what have you.
Yeah,
I don't really have anything. I basically just watched that Netflix documentary, and I didn't do a whole lot of searching for things beyond that. So I don't have a lot of odd theories. That's one thing I thought about before we started, but I didn't have time to do it, was just kind of searching what kind of really odd off the wall theories have been brought forth by people. I'm sure there's some really nutty ones out there, but
there are.
I don't know much beyond the documentary, which mostly focused on the one guy. And didn't really, I mean, they talked about a handful of other people, but it really was just kind of focused on like, is this a guy or is this not the guy?
Yeah, so there you talking about Rackshaw, or you talking about the guy who was investigating, or both, I guess?
Yeah, Rackstraw.
Kind of, yeah. So they had a couple suspects in the documentary here, Justin. If you have some other ones, you can throw them into. But Robert Rackshaw was the one they focused on vast majority of the time in the Netflix show, who had just a lot of weird, suspicious things about the guy that kind of tie into this. So he had a Vietnam Army experience, and he had ties to planes and how they work, and also seemed like his personality type would really match up with this, and like that he was a daredevil, and that like he would just do kind of weird crap or whatever.
Made a criminal background.
Yeah, good call. Criminal background. His ex-wife mentioned she looked in his suitcase because he'd be gone for long trips at a time, and she looked in there one time because she had never seen what he actually brought on his trips, and there was a toupee and fake mustache in the suitcase, even though he had a mustache, but would shave it off.
He needed a better mustache.
Yeah, kind of odd. So I don't know what he was up to, but they gave a good example of like he went to a club and like lied and said he called the club ahead of time and told them that President Reagan's personal pilot would be coming to the club and to treat him well, and then gave them his name, and then when he showed up, they like gave him the best service of everything. So I was like, this is
which seems like a crazy. I wouldn't go somewhere and think like, oh yeah, who's going to get like really great treatment? A president's personal pilot.
Yeah.
That's who I want to be.
Yeah, now you'd go to the club and they'd be like, who cares?
You got $20 to get in?
Yeah. So this guy was kind of, like I said, the focus of most of the Netflix documentary, but they hounded the guy quite a bit later in his life, trying to get him to confess to being DB Cooper and try to interview him and things like this. But it's interesting too, like they showed some of the earlier interviews with this guy that I don't know exactly when those were from, the 90s maybe ish or 80s. And he like definitely did not go out of his way to like deny being DB Cooper. Like he kind of played it up a little bit. Like, yeah, sure, I could be DB Cooper. Yeah, sure, I could have done that. Yeah, sure.
That was the thing I found most intriguing about him, is that at least the way they kind of showed it in the documentary was that like he never at any point ever in the in the history of everything all this never said, I am not DB Cooper. He never said those words. At least that's the way they presented it.
Yeah, right.
And in fact, at some points, like you said, kind of alluded like, well, I could be, and you'd never know.
Yeah.
But if it's kind of weird. Is it just a personality thing as to where a person just is, I don't know, just like they have something that they don't want to say that simply because maybe like I say, maybe the person liked the attention, or why would you not just say I'm not DB Cooper unless he was, and yeah, I don't know. It's kind of, that's like I say, that was the first thing I found most interesting about this person, was that he just would not say it for some
reason. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's definitely that personality type, I guess, where you like play it up for attention or fame, like you said, or whatever. But it is interesting, like why you just wouldn't say. And then the weirder thing is, like later on when they interviewed him and like we're trying to get the new interview with him, he seemed like really annoyed that they were like trying to talk to him. I'm like, well, you're the one that
right.
didn't say you weren't DB Cooper, so.
Exactly. They did kind of make that point at one during the documentary. Was just tell us that you're not, and we'll leave you alone.
I thought during the first interview, he didn't necessarily say the words, I am not DB Cooper, but when they were sitting down, I thought he said, something along the lines of, I'm not him, right? Or something like that. And he may not have said, I'm not DB Cooper, but, so I don't know, it really felt like they were being kind of belligerent towards him by the time I stopped watching. So
it's interesting. So this is Robert Rackshaw. You can look him up, I guess, or if you watch the Netflix documentary, a lot of information about him just because he's kind of the main suspect. And then they had towards the end of this documentary that he had passed away in 2019. So if he was DB Cooper, that has been taken to the grave, I guess, at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Only other suspect they really went into, I think on the Netflix one, was a person named Dick Briggs. I don't know if he was on yours, any of your research, Justin, but
I have him,
name.
Yeah, I do have him mentioned over here. Yeah. I don't have a whole lot about him because he was only mentioned kind of in passing in the book that I read, but okay. Yeah.
I think if I remember right, like, isn't he how they got to Rackshaw? Like there's some connection between the two.
Yeah. There's
Dick Briggs was the guy who was like bragging that he was DB Cooper, and then they looked into him and they're like, this guy's a moron. He's not DB Cooper, but he knows this other guy who you might have heard the tale from.
Yeah. There's a lot of that in the lore here.
I thought the crime chart or whatever you want to say they put together in the Netflix documentary that they kept handing to Rackshaw was actually fairly well done. It looked like had like some pretty good connections between people and things. Okay, what else do we got here? Well, it's just anything you got. So crazy theories or connections to anything else.
Well, I've got
Justin, you got a couple more there before I do some more.
Yeah, I do have a few others. I guess I'll start with the least crazy and sort of work my way down. So Richard Floyd McCoy is one that was mentioned a bit in the book I'm reading. He was like one of the, I guess, 2 or 3 focal points. In the book, by the way, is Skyjack, The Hunt for DB Cooper by Jeffrey Gray, if you want to check it out. I'm just trying to give the guy some credit. But
I also want to point out to our listeners that Justin claimed he was drinking bourbon and 7-Up, and I distinctly just saw him pour some Sprite into something.
It's 7-Up is the same thing as Sprite. I'm pretty close.
Okay.
Okay, look, you want to see the bourbon? There's the bourbon. Old Crow, It's not good.
Oh, well.
Okay, sure. So Richard Floyd McCoy, was kind of a career criminal, for lack of a better term. I don't have as many notes on him as some of the others, but he actually was convicted of hijacking another 727 at one point. Got out, and because he had the experience, they thought perhaps maybe he tried another one. He was another very cagey sort of guy, saying, who wouldn't admit that he wouldn't say flat out he wasn't DB Cooper. I think in one of the interviews, they asked him straight out, "Are you DB Cooper?" And he's like, "Well, I might be." There's words to that effect. But pretty much, the more you look into this guy, the more he seems like he's just a kind of a con man, someone who he'll do a lot of stuff, but he wants to take credit for more than what he's done. He is one of the suspects the FBI has written off. The focal point of the book seems to be this guy named Ken Christensen. And according to Jeffrey Gray, the author, he first found out about this guy and got into the whole Cooper thing in general because of it's a weird story. So he got word of Ken Christensen's brother, Lyle Christensen, who was trying to get in touch with the actress Nora Ephron, the director Nora Ephron, who directed things like Sleepless in Seattle, to try and get a movie made about his brother. And the reason he wanted a movie made about his brother is because he claimed his brother was DB Cooper. And it's a whole weird thing where this Lyle guy hired private eyes to deliver messages to Nora Ephron herself to try and get this movie pitched. And that's how somehow Gray found out about it. He got roped into it, and he started looking deeper into it. Ken Christensen did have some, parachuting training. He was in the 11th Airborne Division in World War II. He actually worked for Northwest Orient, the plane company that was hijacked by DB Cooper, circa 1949.
1949?
49, yeah. So he, the older guy.
Yeah.
So he was actually born in 1926, died of cancer in 1994. So if he was Cooper, well, he took it to the grave. But so he has the history with the company. He has the training of using parachutes and aviation. He would probably know about 727s and how to operate the aft stairs. Yet the FBI has still ruled him out. I think physically he didn't match the description that the stewardess gave them about what Cooper actually looked like. And he wasn't the right height, wasn't the right build. I think his eyes were the wrong color.
Black dude.
I think he was like 5'8", and Cooper was between like 5'10" and 6 feet tall. Oh. Different color eyes, that sort of thing. It gets weirder from there. Dwayne Weber, who only came to light because on his deathbed, he basically called his wife to him and said, "I have something to tell you. I am Dan Cooper." And the way it's written in the book, when she didn't seem to recognize anything like that, he repeated it and stressed the last name, like, "I am Dan Cooper." It's how it's written in the book. So like then he dies. He dies after that, and so his wife is going about setting his affairs to rest and whatnot, and she comes across a safety deposit box, and all that's in it is an issue of Soldier of Fortune magazine, which is a little weird. So she starts digging a bit more into his past, and she finds out he had another family at one point. He was essentially a career criminal. He'd been arrested multiple times before they had met. He was connected to other criminals who did other very nefarious things, and she's still trying to dig into what the heck her husband has done and whether or not he's Dan Cooper, at least as of 2011 or whenever this book was written. So the more she digs, the more she finds out that she didn't know the man she married. So complete another secret life there.
Why do you suppose so many people, like, on their deathbed profess to be like a famous person? That's a bizarre. I wonder if that has like a real name in psychology. Like, that's a weird.
I would hope it does.
That's just, it's strange. Like, one thing to like confess something like from your life that you never told anyone or you held a secret or whatever, but it's weird that there's so many people that are like, "I'm Elvis." at the last second. Like, what?
I don't know.
I would have
Maybe it's
loved if what if he's like, I'm Dan Cooper, and she's like, no, you're not, and then he died. Like that was the end. Boom.
Well, if she hadn't started, finding weird little pieces of his life she wasn't aware of, maybe that would have ended there.
Okay.
And the
fair.
last one is probably the weirdest that was mentioned in Skyjack here. So Robert Dayton, or later Barbara Dayton, who was oh man, there's a lot on this person, and a lot of it is very circumstantial. Basically transsexual, living most of their life in a man's body, eventually did go through the reassignment surgery, but never really felt like she presented as a woman. It mentions several times in the book that the facial features weren't right, that they have bad teeth, that they never really felt comfortable in the skin they were in one way or the other. So a lot of depression, a lot of pent up frustration about life and that sort of thing in general. Also a history of skydiving, a history of engineering. Like she worked on building her own aircraft pretty much out of spare parts and things.
Just whatever she had laying around, like titanium and antimony.
There's yeah, but it's there's a lot of weird stuff about her, and people that she had actually felt comfortable talking to and getting to know. At one point, one of them made a joke about her being DB Cooper, and she took it very, very seriously. Don't ever say that in public again. Don't even joke about it, that sort of thing. And around the time that the hijacking took place, I've got the date here, December 8th of 1971, went in to see her psychiatrist because, well, she had been seeing one for a while. Up till this point, she had been on welfare. She had been chronically depressed, attempted suicide a couple of times, I think it said in the book. Excuse me. But on this particular date, she seemed perfectly fine. Didn't seem terribly worried about money, despite the fact that all the other times up until this point, she had been very worried about making ends meet and her life and all that. But in her accounts of the events of the case, she was wrong on several details. The amount of money in each strap of bills, that where she claims to have landed, because she did eventually give interviews on this. Her appearance was entirely wrong, even back when she was presenting as a man. So there's a lot of things that seem like they're kind of in line with someone who would have been able to pull this off, but there are other elements, as with everyone in this list, where it just doesn't add up at all. So is this just another case of someone wanting to feel important, wanting to feel like they're more than what they are, or is there actually something here? It's hard to say.
I mean, it's interesting theory. It's like the Jill the Ripper theory that it's like a lady who committed the crimes, or
and there are some who say, oh, that's the perfect disguise. Like after you committed a crime as a man, you go through the surgery to become a woman, and no one's going to be able to put two and two together, kind of thing.
I mean, honestly, right? It's not a bad way
so
to go about it.
So that's probably the weirdest one that I have here, in terms of an actual suspect. There's other theories and whatnot, but they don't tie into specific people.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we didn't. They might have mentioned a lady on the documentary, but they didn't go into detail on it at all. Okay, well, suspects then. Let's head to any other bizarre things about this case. So one thing the documentary, really in episode 4, maybe the end of episode 3, they started to talk about one real avenue of exploration that hasn't been discussed as much, I guess, as the stuff that is out there, is the idea that it was a Canadian who committed the crime on American soil. And they put this in a couple different ways. So one is, there is apparently, I don't know this character, but there's apparently a comic book character called Dan Cooper, who is a guy who jumps out of planes. And this is a French comic book based in Canada, but this is like a well-known comic book character in Canada, it said in the documentary at least. And some of the cases in the book like eerily match the details of the case that was committed. I mean, the crime that was committed. So there's also mention here that the 2 medals that they found on the tie also could have been tied to a Air Force ground crew directly that they found between Boeing and the Canadian Air Force. And this was mentioned here, at least in the 70s, in the documentary, saying that we didn't have a real good relationship with Canada at the time. So even if the like FBI had asked to research into it, they probably would not have allowed them to at that exact moment in time. So we got a few things here. And then I guess like it's kind of a good idea, I suppose, too, depending on how lax border security was, like come down from Canada, fly from Portland to Seattle, Seattle back, and you're fairly close to the Canadian border up in that area. And then the other weird thing they mentioned here was when they wrote down what Cooper had requested, he very, very clearly had requested American currency, which they think is bizarre because an American would have just requested like money,
Right. I did like that tidbit of it.
Yeah. They even went, this is the minutia I was talking about. They were like arguing over, he asked for like negotiable American currency, and then they were debating whether like the person who wrote it down had added negotiable or if that was whatever, but they distinctly, I guess, said that he stated American currency, which they said if he was a Canadian, like might have been his one slip up in like playing it cool, was like he was like, I need American money. Oh, I mean my human friends. I mean friends. That was kind of interesting too. But yeah, basically people at the end of episode 4 were like, if you're going to continue to do research on DB Cooper, go north of the border, because that's like the part that hasn't been explored the most. So that's one thing. Anybody else have any stuff out there?
Well, just like that bit of it just made me wonder, I'm sure it's significantly different now, but let's just say it was a Canadian, comes down, does the heist, takes the money back to Canada, clearly would have to exchange it. I don't think they would be spending American bills in Canada. I don't know, but I mean that was 50 years ago, so I have no
That's a
idea
good question.
what it was like that. But so if he exchanges the bills, would anyone in Canada? I mean, I suppose they would have obviously put it was like news that they would have heard, so they probably would have said, "Oh, that's a lot of American bills. What are you doing with these?" And like search them, or like validated them, whatever. But also on the other hand, maybe they, if he had done it like in smaller, stacks, could he have just like slowly, essentially like laundered the money through Canada, because they wouldn't have bothered to check. They would just like, okay, here's your Canadian dollars.
Yeah, because you could
just
probably
went out about their business.
probably spend like $40 a week in Canada, which would have been, still good money at that time. But like two $20 bills, they probably were not like, oh, let's check these two $20 bills.
Yeah.
Especially for another country's hijacker. That's interesting. Yeah.
Because that's probably the most interesting, one of the more interesting parts about this whole thing is that the money was never found. Other than that bit that was in the river, which is an odd thing in itself. Like, how the hell did that get there? Why is it there? But this person, if he had taken the money to a bank, I think they very clearly would have been able to, like, they would have checked it and they would have been able to verify that it was the stolen money. So you could pretty much guarantee it's not in a bank somewhere. It never was in a bank. It certainly is possible that it was just slowly spent over the years and those bills have never been found because we said before, if you were, a person taking in $20-$40 for whatever clothing, they're not going to say, oh, well, let's check these bills because they might have been from this heist or something. which is likely a reason why he asked for the smaller bills, because larger bills people would be more interested in checking. But yeah, just the fact that all this money is just kind of disappeared, it raises just some interesting questions on, like, where did it go?
Yep.
If the person survived, because that's a bit of it that they that has certainly been kind of posted as a possibility, is that he just didn't survive the jump out of the plane. He just went splat somewhere and the money's still there with him somewhere. Though they did kind of search as best you could in the situation, the area where they thought he may have jumped out of, but that area could be it's literally hundreds of miles of area to search, hundreds of square miles.
Yeah, they searched 800 square miles of it, but I think it's actually bigger than that even. So
yeah, that's kind of what I was just kind of summarizing my thoughts here too, and was thinking about like exactly what some of the questions you just had, Brett. Like, so to me, it's like question one: who could survive if you're looking at suspects? Like, this is a very deliberate way to steal money. So you would have to have, like, I would never consider this because multiple reasons. I would die for number one. I'm afraid of heights for number two. It's rainy. It's nighttime. Like, it's crazy.
I swear, Your Honor.
Crazy stuff. Yeah. Question two, like, why would you do it? And that kind of ties into your two questions about the money. Like, why did they find only that bit, and why was the rest never spent? Because, okay, so like flowchart here, did he survive or didn't he survive? If he did survive and he never spent the money, then was it just for the fame? Is that why he did this? Like, is that the reason that he planned this whole crime, or was there a different reason for it?
They kind of say, oh well, this person got off with the money, now they're rich somewhere. Well, I don't think they are. If they're still alive, they're not rich, because the money, they don't have it.
Yeah.
And if they did have it, they're still not rich, because it's only $200,000 now.
Yeah.
Which was a ton of money back then, but now, I mean, it's still a lot of money, but it's not like, oh my God, I'm going to live forever on this.
Right.
And this is a good point, because this is a very unique circumstance where, like, someone commits what they basically call the picture perfect crime here, but like doesn't seem to have benefited from it in any tangible way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that does bring up one of the other conspiracy theories about this, where that it is an inside job, or at least what do you call I guess a black flag operation, because as we mentioned earlier on, 1971, there's no airport security to speak of at all. It's just you come in, you just walk right into the airport. They don't check your bags. You buy a ticket the same day you get on the flight. It's
cash.
Very in cash. It's very laissez-faire. So
just like stuck on a bus, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And some people think that this was a concerted effort by the U.S. government to try and force the issue of airport security into being a thing. And what better way to do that than to create a crisis where someone has hijacked a plane and stolen a lot of money? Yes, no one got hurt, but someone could have. That's always kind of like the boogeyman in the background saying that, oh, look what could happen if we don't do this. And I'm not saying I necessarily believe that's what happened, but there are proponents of that idea that this whole thing was an inside job. Also, why he was never caught, because the FBI wanted this to happen to further an agenda to, exert more control over people. So, like I said, I don't necessarily put much credence into that myself, but it is a theory that's out there.
So is that theory stating that the pilots and the stewardess were in on this, or they were just like unwilling participants in this exercise?
Generally that they were unwilling participants, but Cooper himself was an FBI operative, or possibly CIA, depending on which rabbit hole you go down. And that, the reason that no one has caught him is because he was working for the people who wanted this to happen in the first place, to play the long game, as it were, to get their agenda executed. Yeah, basically all I was saying was it's it's just one of many conspiracy theories out there saying that, well, this is speculation, but it kind of makes sense if you look at it from this perspective. And, even if he was working for the FBI, maybe he never profited from the money itself. Maybe he just furthered their goals and they let him go after that. And there's all sorts of things out there about what ifs and maybes and that sort of thing.
It's like the government could have just taken the money and DB back and maybe just like lost the money that they found on the shore.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like a really just kind of like a typical like wild conspiracy theory, because it doesn't have a lot of logical connections.
Yeah.
Because if let's just say, okay, the FBI wanted stronger airport security, why wouldn't they just impose that? Why would they go through all this theatrics and to like hope that it happens?
Well, I think the quote unquote reasoning, and I use this word very loosely, behind that is, well, this way the public has a crisis to latch onto, a reason to actually not be upset with us instituting all of these new restrictions, these new guidelines. They've seen what can happen if we don't push ahead with this. I think that's kind of the reason, or at least the reason that the conspiracy theorists put forth.
I suppose,
whereas if they
there could have been a fair amount of pushback on like invasion of privacy stuff, perhaps.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really no different than like post 9/11, like how much things changed. And there's certainly those crazy people that have their conspiracy theories about 9/11 and any facet of that as well. But
which is why I want to state again for the record that I don't subscribe to any of these theories about DB Cooper or 9/11, but I'm just saying this is some of what's out there. So.
Why are you wearing a tinfoil hat, though, is my question.
It's comfy.
Okay, fair. It's very warming. I'm just dyeing my hair jet black for let's see what else we got here. I don't know. Anybody have any last thoughts here? Other things we want to cover? I just mentioned like the documentary said like, they believe that this was such an endearing legend because it was basically the perfect crime and like really didn't hurt anyone. Like he's, they compared it to Robin Hood, which I don't necessarily agree with unless he was filtering those 20s back into society in some charitable way. But yeah, I guess that's kind of true. And then I also mentioned here, I wrote down that the main guy, I think his last name was Colbert, wasn't it? Because I kept thinking they were talking about Stephen Colbert and it was like this other guy, but they said he estimates that he has now spent $200,000 of his own money trying to find DB Cooper, which was the money he took originally. So. Be hilarious.
Irony.
It was like his grandpa was like, years down the road, spend this money.
I'm Dan Cooper.
Cooper. Oh, that's funny. And then I also like the very last line of the documentary was one of the guys. He said, we live in a time where there can be no debate because facts can be found in 2 seconds. And I was thinking, like, do you live in like the world we live in at all? Because we debate everything and facts are not facts anymore. So what are you talking about?
One thing to tie this into an earlier part we talked about with the comic book. Jeffrey Gray, in doing his book here, he actually, when he found out about the comic book artist, he tracked the guy down and did a bit of an interview with him. And the guy was actually Belgian, the artist. And it was kind of a phone interview because he obviously wasn't going to go to Belgium and vice versa. So he said the way that the section ends is, and what about Dan Cooper? How would he, being the comic book artist whose name was Albert Weinberg, how would you define his character? And Weinberg says, I think the main quality of my character is that he is very, very sensitive. Even though he was a military pilot, he always held a high regard for human life. It would have been difficult for me to make Dan Cooper proudly shooting at another plane. So this kind of ties into the fact that no one was hurt during all of this. So if, and this is a big if, the hijacker took the name Dan Cooper from this comic book, then he was playing it to the hilt. he hurt nobody. The threat was there, but he never acted on it, and he just did his thing and went on his way. And yeah, it's an interesting tie-in if there's anything at all to it, because that's one hell of an attention to detail. If this guy decided, I'm going to make sure I don't hurt anybody while I steal all this money.
Well, I mean, it's, if nothing else, I think it ties into that Canadian angle, which is just really interesting. Like, we can trace the metal to that. We can trace the American currency to that. The documentary even mentioned, like, there was, I think, didn't they say too that there was like reports that there were several flares that were shot near where he had jumped out of the plane, and like, so that seemed like a setup as well, and that he had hopped on another plane right away at that airfield and flew somewhere and then flew somewhere else, and like by that point you've lost him. And this is I don't know what else to say about this one.
It's a fascinating case.
It is a really fascinating case. Yeah, I definitely agree. I guess yeah, I don't know. I mean, just I hadn't really done the math on the age before, but like if there was a, well, there is a DB Cooper, I guess, because that we all agree on that part, at least, I think, right?
Yeah.
There was a guy on a plane who did something crazy. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I did come up with a way to rank this, but does anybody have anything else they want to add here before we get to that? This is a really fascinating case.
I've exhausted the notes that I had on it.
Yeah, same, more or less. I mean, I've got a lot of like little miscellaneous things that are kind of about side stuff, but nothing really substantial.
All right, well, maybe we do
say it's remains the only unsolved case of air piracy in our nation's history.
Okay. You think he could have survived that fall? I don't know. I mean, he could, I guess, but the money thing is weird. I don't know.
Yeah.
I would say if the person that jumped out of that plane did truly have, knowledge and experience in parachuting, I can't imagine that they died from that jump. Unless they were coming down, and since it was dark, he gets like tangled in some trees and like falls to his death from the top of a tree or something. But in that case, it would have been maybe not highly likely, but pretty likely that they would have found the evidence of that, because they searched a wide area using planes and helicopters and things, and they never found like a parachute stuck in a tree.
They had mentioned he jumped out near that one lake whose name escapes me at the moment, but like I wonder if, I'm sure they must have like done every feasible test of that lake as well, but
Tenebar, that lake where they found the money, or
no, I thought it started with a V. It was like where he was jumping towards or something. I thought I could have that even mixed up though. What the heck's going on here?
Okay,
thought it was like Vancouver, Victoria, or something like that, but
okay.
Anyway,
okay,
so here's how I came up with to rank this one. I always do like a rating at the end here, so I'm just gonna word it this way, which I think is fun. So a scale of 1 being they never will, and 10 being conclusively they will they ever successfully identify who DB Cooper was? Nice and easy. So it's interesting to me that like we're saying that there's new facts, like even since we just watched that. Well, I literally watched the podcast last 3 days, but since that has been made on and been on Netflix, you're saying there's like new things that are coming up still. So that's intriguing to me. I don't know. To me, this is a little bit like, well, it's not, this is so tough. Like, to me, the first thing I think of when I think of like, will they ever solve this, is like the Kennedy assassination, oddly, even though like we have a documented, like he was the shooter in Oswald, but like, unless someone is literally sitting on that somewhere in the government at this point and has refused to release that for the past 60 years, like, I don't know if we're going to get anything new conclusively that's going to solve that case, quote unquote. And I kind of consider this the same thing, where like, what is going to come out now 50 years down the road that's going to be this no pun intended, but pun intended, magic bullet to solve this case, right? Of like, I mean, what could possibly come out? I mean, everybody who would have been alive at that point is gone, unless it's an extremely rare case of really old age and senile mind at this point, where they could still talk about that. So then you're left with the like deathbed confessions, and my relative was, and like, here's this one thing we just remembered. And like, I didn't buy for a second the people they interviewed in the documentary that were like, I remember the guy's face really well from 50 years. Bullshit, you do. You don't remember the guy's face. At best, you remember like the sketch that's famous now. And so as far as will they ever be found, that's tough. The Rackshaw guy had a lot going for him, but he had holes, and this Canadian angle is kind of intriguing to me. So I don't know that this will be solved. I'm going to rank this one with a 4 out of 10. Maybe there's a chance, but like a couple people mentioned in the documentary, you know, maybe it's best if they never do. Like, it's just a legend. So I'll give it a 4 out of 10. Maybe there's a chance he'll be found someday.
All right.
Okay. Oh, did you want to go next, Brett? Or
go ahead.
okay. So until my wife shared that article that I shared with you guys about the titanium antimony alloy that was found on the tie, I would have probably rated this fairly low too. But technology has progressed a lot since since 1971. They didn't have DNA testing back then. Not that there's any DNA to be found on any of the remaining evidence. They've checked. There's nothing usable, but there's been advances in other things too, metallurgy, that sort of thing, to the point where this researcher was able to detect the particles of titanium, antimony, that alloy. And given that that is so rare and it points to seemingly one specific company, that seems like it could narrow things down significantly, because only a set number of people will have ever worked for that company. Only a set number would have had anywhere near the skills required to pull off a heist like Cooper did. Not sure if the Canadian connection is any part there, but if it is, that might narrow it down further. So given this most recent development, I think that ratchets up the chances of him being found, or at least identified, pretty highly. So, I mean, is the person dead by this point? Most likely. I mean, is there any real point to finding him, considering he's going to be old as dirt, even if he is alive? Not really. But being able to pin a name on the man, the myth, the legend would be something else. And I think we're a lot closer now than we have been at any point in the last 50 years or so. So I'm going to say chances of him being found or identified, 6 out of 10. I mean,
6 out of 10.
Yeah. So I mean, it's still a little iffy, but it's a lot closer than it would have been otherwise.
Okay.
All right. I mean, I think it's gotten to a point where, obviously, like you say, they're coming up with a bit of evidence here that does seem to, narrow it down potentially. But at the same time, it's like, how would, I don't know. I guess what I'm, is like, it still doesn't point to anyone. You still would have to, I don't know how you would get that evidence to point to a particular person, without somebody coming forward and saying, oh yeah, you finally got close enough, I'll admit to it. Except we've had like dozens, perhaps hundreds of people have already done that. And, all of them have reasons that we could say, no, it was not you, and move on. So, even if somebody comes forward and says that it was them, I think the only possible way this gets solved is if someone comes forward with a suitcase of money that matches the bills. I think that's the only way that this ever gets solved conclusively, because anybody can say, oh yeah, it was me, or it was my brother, or it was my uncle, or my grandpa's barber's best friend said it was this guy he bowled with. You know, there's just isn't enough concrete evidence to be able to point to anybody, you know, that we have currently to do that. So unless somebody brings the bills for it, I don't see this getting solved ever. And as I think Cody, you guys said, like maybe it's better that way. Maybe it's better just being this American legend, this kind of almost mythological figure at this point. You know, he really is kind of, even then, you know, they made the point in the documentary that, you know, very quickly after it happened that this DB Cooper person became like almost like an idol to a lot of people. Like they like, oh, I want to be like this guy. He's like so smooth and cool, and you know, maybe it's just better staying that way because there's no real, you know, it's not like you're getting justice for anyone really. You know, the people who were out the money, like I don't even know who that technically would have been then. Like,
yeah,
it wasn't like individual people, I don't think so. Like,
I think the insurance for the airline covered it actually.
yeah.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Yeah.
like, no one's getting justice. It would just be just information that we're getting. So, I mean, just leave it be.
I guess the other side is if they found a body instead of the money, if they actually found like I don't know, you know, body somewhere. Seems like I don't know. Seems like they would have. Have we Google Earth this yet?
But, anyways, I never gave it a number, so I'm gonna throw
Yeah.
2 at it.
Ooh, 246. Okay, so we're kind of playing it even here. Yeah, it's just I had another thought in there, but I think I lost the thought. I don't know what the thought was, but anyway. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever. Justin seems optimistic. Maybe there's a shot.
Yeah, because
6 out of 10 is more than half. So you're telling me you think it's more likely that they will find who this is?
Yeah, but not like a surefire thing by any means. But given
I
that
see,
this, given that this evidence seems to point to a specific company, only a certain number of people would have worked there at that particular time, and only a certain number of that subset would have had the experience and knowledge necessary to pull off a heist like this. It seems like that narrows it down significantly. So, and yeah, there is a certain mystique to this, and there is a kind of that alluring factor of having it always be a myth, but I'm of the camp that it's always better to know. I mean, there's nothing less magical or less wondrous about realizing that, oh, the guy who did this was actually Dan Johnson of, you know, Pennsylvania, you know, bumfuck Pennsylvania, whatever, and figuring out how he did it. There's nothing less magical about that than it being some nebulous, unidentifiable person who did it somehow. I mean, knowing that knowing the magic trick doesn't spoil the magic trick. There's still an art to it. There's still skill involved. There's still that level of wonder of seeing it pulled off, even if you know how it works. That's kind of the camp I'm in.
I do wonder if you're in the minority of who pulled
I probably am
on that, but I remember another thought too, which is that, you know, in the early 70s, they said it was like a hard economic time, so I could see why he was probably like a folk hero to a lot of people. But I was also curious, like how much of his like smooth reputation and stuff has been embellished over the years, because I would think the longer this legend goes on, they're like, oh yeah, he was like this guy who was sweet talking the stewardess and he had his cocktail he was drinking, and like that part has probably grown, I would think, over the years.
I'd have to agree with that too.
Anyway. All right, anybody got any last thoughts here on DB Cooper wrapping up this week?
No, it's a fascinating case even to this day. We'll see if anything develops from this most recent batch of potential evidence.
If you see something I don't, keep us posted.
Of course.
Kind of interested. Well, okay, then I guess that's going to do us this time on Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing, and we'll head out today with the theme song sung as a dramatic score to the DB Cooper mystery, solving who did this, and starring Chris Pratt.
Ooh.
Here we go. Friends occasionally not disagreeing. I'm Dan Cooper. We'll see you next time, everybody. Take care.
Yeah.
Good night.